let's do this like we did. For those of you that were at the last meeting, if you guys could if you have questions, pop them in the chat box. So Darren and I will be kind of like last time, taking turns teaching on each subject. Our goal is to get through the slides in an hour and then have a Q&A at the end. And then if we have time as we're going to kind of answer questions, we absolutely will. And so I will go ahead and get us started. So this class is just the Airbnb Blueprint. So for you guys that maybe haven't started the journey yet, or who are wanting to start the journey, or maybe you have one and you're wanting to get two or maximize, I hope that there is so much good information for you in this class today. We looked at this a little bit last time, but I want to just start with kind of biblical values that encourage investing. And so this was super important to us as we started. As you know, most of you know, we are 2-year believers, so we are newer in our journey. And especially when we're looking at, we just moved quite a bit of property, we really wanted to make sure that it felt biblical to us and that we were doing something that was honoring to the Lord. So we believe that the Bible shows us that we must be good stewards, we must activate, we must be generous, and we're called to leave generational wealth. So in Proverbs 21:20, it says, "The wise store up choice food and olive oils, but the fools gulp theirs down." So for those of us in the real estate industry, we know how flashy this biz is. I just talked to an agent yesterday who, when we were all making all the hay, right, in the, pre-COVID time, her debt is associated to that level of income. And now she's in a pretty stressful spot, right? Because she's leveraged to the income she was making and not now. So we've got to be good stewards of what God shares with us. And then in Proverbs also 14:23, "All hard work brings a profit, but mere talk only leads to poverty." So it was interesting. Darren and I real recently took a Bill Faith. If you don't follow him, he is great in the short-term rental space class. And this was a high-level class, guys. It was a 2-day boot camp. It was a lot. And I would say, 60 to 75% of people owned 0 properties. So they hadn't activated yet. So I think we have to activate. And then I think we're all called to be generous, right? A generous person will prosper. Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed. And so just think of this, right? I know it can be really scary to enter, but right, we're called, I think, for the money to flow in and to flow out. And these properties can also be, Teresa and I have talked about this quite a bit, just a blessing to people, right? Like, how do we bless others because we own properties that we can share? And then leaving generational wealth. I think most people on this call probably have some interest in that. What can we do for our families? And in Proverbs, again, 13:22, "A good person leaves an inheritance for their children's children, but a sinner's wealth is stored up for the righteous." And so I think that just shows us that, to me, this shows us that investing is smart. And there's that, parable about the guy the one that hides the coins. God is like, "No, don't do that." The one that doubles their coins, the God's like, "Thumbs up," right? So that's the Aaron overview of that parable. But you know which one I'm talking about. So we'll keep going here. If anybody has anything they would like to add to that, we are always wanting to learn more about that. And again, guys, a lot of you guys were on our last call, so I will pop through this one quickly, but this is where we started. So our first short-term rental we purchased in 2019 for $14,000. So we had the second home loan. We earned additional commission. So we wrote in the contract that we would earn 6%. We put all of that towards our down payment. We also asked for 4% in closing costs. And so all of that was covered at closing. So this was our first one. We still own it to today, still makes us great money. And so that's where we started. I will tell you guys though, because I feel like there's so many people on social media that are like, super flashy about the real estate pace. Darren and I have bought and sold 40 investment properties. So this is not where our journey started. And that includes flips and long-term rentals and partnerships that we had and things. So we've been in the space longer than that, but this is where our Airbnb journey officially started. So for you Colorado people, you can stay there today. And then a little bit about where we're at. So in 2014, we had 8 from Colorado, Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina. And Again, we grossed 485 on those last year, and our profits are about 25%. So just a good metric for you guys to look at, and we'll teach you a little bit about numbers today. And then we'll get into what we've bought recently. So in about the last 3 weeks, we've acquired 4 properties. So we're going to do some case studies with you guys today. One we bought fits the numbers and makes a lot of sense, and one you might be like, why did you guys buy this one, right? So we're going to kind of go through that with you. And so today you're going to learn how to identify markets, which we've got people from all over on this call. So I think this will be really interesting discussion. How to look at permits and zoning, because I'll tell you guys, we literally made every mistake here. Some of the 40 that we've sold are because we bought in places we couldn't do what we wanted to do there, right? And so, for example, we had bought one in Fort Collins. The city said it was okay. County was okay, but then the HOA had regulations and we didn't think to check there. That was early on in our journey. And then we'll look at financing options and then simple ways to evaluate a property. So we're going to start just on very simple math today. And I think our next class is going to be on that more in-depth math for those of you who really want to get into the nuts and bolts of evaluating properties. But I'll tell you, and I can't remember if it was somebody on this call, but every investor shops differently, right? Some people shop purely gut-based. Some people want all the metrics. They want to know the net operating income, their cash on cash, what's the cap rate. They want to know all these things, and everybody in between. So that's what you guys will come out of today. If you guys will put in the comments for me, if you currently own an Airbnb, will you put it in the comments and put where it is, just so people have an opportunity maybe to get connected on this call. I thought that would be kind of cool to know. So please do that if you do.
Yeah. So, our short-term rentals, right, for you, I guess, if you're on this call, it's something that you're kicking around or you've already have some. So, like Aaron said, we started when we start 2009 with our first long-term rental. So when we first got into investing, and that kind of progressed. When we got that first short-term rental of 2019, and that's kind of when we decided to, move into the niche of short-term rentals and sell some long-term rentals and move that way. The reason we did that is short-term rentals typically have a higher cash flow than long-term rental. You can earn 2 to 3 times more than you can on a long-term rental just with the cash flow. Has owner flexibility. Part of the reason we bought that first one was really for ourselves. It was close enough to town that we could go there. We were busy, selling a lot of real estate. We could drive back in 40 minutes if we needed to show a house on a Saturday. So there was that owner flexibility and short-term rental cash flow piece that went into our first purchase. There's definitely more turnover. You've got cleaners coming every few days to a week. That's always checking on the property, keeping it up. Less wear and tear on it because it's being cleaned and maintained more frequently, and then just dynamic pricing, obviously taking advantage of the seasonality where you're able to, instead of a flat monthly rate, you're able to take advantage of the summer season, winter season, whatever season you're in, depending on the market, where you can increase cash flow based on demand. And then the cons of short-term rentals are, some of the things that people are always concerned about. Obviously, is the higher operating cost than you do with a long-term rental. You're paying for utilities, cable, internet, toilet paper towels, furnishing, and furnishing a short-term rental. We'll talk about buying furnished versus non-furnished in a little bit. But obviously, a fully furnished house is a considerable investment. And then more hands-on, when you have guests coming and going, you've got routine messaging, maintenance, communication, things like that you don't have in a long-term rental. And then the positive of the seasonality of being able to increase rents during the demand and the high season. You've also got the downside of the low season. If you're in a Colorado mountain town in the wintertime, seasonality can drop quite a bit during the winter. And then time expectations. So Adina, like I said, we hired her about a year ago. She's been my lifesaver, plus a lot of other things. But she helps us. She basically hired her to take over the guest messaging. Since then, she's taken over cleaner coordinating, maintenance, pretty much everything for me. And at 8 properties, I would say that was about 20 hours a week, 25 hours a week, somewhere around there. As a new host, taking on one property, doing it by yourself, I'd estimate 2 to 5 hours a week for one property. as you're getting started. And then once you get kind of set up, get some experience, get some more systems in place, that could, go down. And we're also, as we've added these more properties, considering bringing somebody on, having Rebecca to help out Adina with some of the messaging, just as we kind of grow and, get bigger and add more properties.
So I'll chat a little bit about, so it looks like a couple of you have Airbnb. So Myrtle Beach is actually, we're going to recommend you guys shop there. It is still a profitable market. So that's where
been on our short list for a long time.
We have been on a property feed in Myrtle for a hot minute. And then it looks like Andrea has one in Hendersonville at her personal residence, which I love, which we're going to kind of talk about that as maybe a way to enter. So how do you choose? So a good way to start is start close to home. So it was really important that Darren and our first Airbnb was 40 minutes away in Drake, Colorado, when we lived in Fort Collins. Because when you're brand new, guys, it's easier to want to be hands-on, right? If there's a problem, you can go fix it and address it. It just was the perfect way to enter. Now, I think maybe we have 6 states now. I'm not entirely sure. We have a lot of states now, but we have the process and we know what we need. And so it's hard to know exactly what you need and how you want to manage so I would say start close to home. And are there any popular vacation destinations by you, right? You can think about that, or major cities that have year-round attractions, right? Like just a big city. Sometimes if you go on the cities right outside of a big city, there can be a good market there because a lot of big cities have rules and regulations, or something with steady corporate travelers, medical travelers, if there's a lot of industry there. So the other thing to actually think about is just think about the town that you're in. So Darren and I own one in Anderson, South Carolina. This is where we live now. And we bought it for $210,000. It's by the college. There's a little private Christian college here. And it's doing really, really, really well. And then we have one in Loveland, Colorado, which again is not like a destination city, but between work and weddings and people visiting, it is one of our top producers. And that one we actually bought that has a 3-car detached garage that had a car lift in it. So we actually rent the garage separately. We have fenced it off, and that brings us in $800 a month, and then we Airbnb the front. So get creative, right? If you need the numbers to make sense.
Yeah. I think one of the advantages of that place in Loveland is because Fort Collins, bigger destination city right next to it, has pretty much banned all short-term rentals. So when you've got a secondary market, restrictions in the primary market, the just outside of that can also be a really good performer.
Yeah, so think about that, guys. How do you check a short-term rental supply? So here's a couple. I'm sure most of you have heard about AirDNA, right? So that is a metric. I will tell you, generally, it's not the best for pricing. So we'll talk kind of about how Darren and I actually prefer to research pricing. And then there's also short-term rental insights, or STR insights. And you want a good rule of thumb is if they're doing mass-produced furnished short-term rentals, like builders are building them, probably not a market that you want to enter. So for example, like Pigeon Forge is in the Smokies here. And not that you can't, right? You can always stand out in a market and do it better, and you can always be profitable, or you might be able to buy into profitability, right? Because in Pigeon Forge, there are a ton of houses on the market, a ton of people that entered during COVID that are exiting, but it's also a market that has every room is themed. There's indoor pools, there's 6-bedroom, beautiful cabins. And so it just can be really hard to stand out. And they are mass producing short-term rentals in that area. So you can literally buy a new build that's furnished in a short-term rental allowable area. But AirDNA or STR Insights can let you know how many Airbnbs have been added in the last year, and then you can look at occupancy trends, right? So if the occupancy rate is declining, so the percentage, so 100% occupancy would mean every day was booked. If the occupancy trends are going down, that might indicate oversaturation. But what we'll tell you, so in Myrtle, for example, 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms and even 4 bedrooms seem to be saturated, but there is a huge bump in revenue at 5 bedrooms. So when you're looking, don't just think about looking at the market as a whole. The other thing that has gotten really, and we just bought one of the properties that we bought has a small cabin. It has a big cabin and a small cabin, and you can rent them together or separately. But these one bedrooms, call them like a lover's retreat or a, where a couple would go, just a couple, no kids, are really getting popular right now. So you would never think about that before.
I would just say with some of the search when people are looking, where do I buy? What's the market? STR Insights is like a super great site to finding a market. It's got really great resources for, occupancy and, as a market on a whole. Probably not as good as looking at a specific house within a market where AirDNA is pulling, direct Airbnb data as far as, daily rates, occupancy rates, and things like that. So, so when we're researching for a property and we're looking for a property, we've been on the hunt for quite a while now. But one of the things we do is look for the not the enemy method, as a lot of people call it, say it's the competitor market, right? So rather than using a lot of those resources from AirDNA, STR's Insights, is I just go onto Airbnb and start looking around at properties. If I'm looking at a 3-bedroom house in whatever market, I'm going to look at some other 3-bedroom houses in that graphic area. What things do they have? What things stand out about the property? What are the top drivers in that market? Do they have converted garages into game rooms? Do they have really sweet backyards? What are the top performers in that market doing? And what are their daily rates? What are their occupancy rates? So it's a little more time consuming, but it gives you more live real data than relying on algorithms from AirDNA or somebody else.
Well, when you're looking at, this is one thing, if you're looking at buying a specific house, so if you've gotten to, we use this for that too, if we want to offer on something and it's already an Airbnb, look at the guest reviews. What do people love and what are they complaining about, right? Like, what problems are you walking into? What do you already know about the property? But you can also do this in this, like Darren said, the STR world calls it the what is it? The enemy
method.
Enemy method doesn't feel appropriate for here, so we'll call it the competitor method. But if you hear people talking about it, but it's like, what are they looking at? And if you want to find top performing, and guys will just start picking dates. Like if something's open on spring break, that's a dud, right? So why is this one a dud? And then find ones that are booked and just try to start doing research. So we mostly do our own research. We don't rely super heavily. We have not found that the data is super accurate, and it's better just to look at the actual houses that are out there.
Orlando is probably the most competitive market out there. I'd say some of the smoky areas, Pigeon Forge, Gatlinburg, are starting to get there. But like, if you look at buying a house there, you've got to spend so much money in game rooms and theme rooms, and like those. They're just like, the competition level there is just so outrageous. Like I would never go in there.
And they're also building mass-produced ones in Orlando. So again, another like, maybe not go there.
Yeah. And so another thing is just looking for what other people aren't doing. So just like I was talking about Orlando and the game rooms and the theme rooms and the movie theaters and things like that. Some of those smaller markets, they're just not doing those things. So when you start seeing niches, like mountain property and a hot tub, or a lot of people aren't doing the big game rooms, and you're buying a house with a 2-car garage. Most Airbnb guests aren't using a garage to actually park in, right? So we have a house right now that we just purchased, and that's our plan as soon as we get down there, is to take a 2-car garage, paint it, finish the flooring, big screen TV, Xbox, some stand-up arcade games, ping pong table, make it like a super sweet game room. So you're adding, taking unused space and adding amenities to really stand out from the rest of the competition. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay. Sorry, guys, trying to get Brian's life in here too. Okay, guys, so where are we shopping? So we just shopped a lot of places. We're going to tell you all about what we just bought, so you guys can kind of see specifically what we're doing. But Bradenton, Florida, we just purchased in near IMG Academy. That is like a sports complex for high school kids that want to be collegiate athletes, right? So you get parents in sometimes for weeks or months for training, for camps, things like that. So we'll tell you about that. Myrtle Beach, we talked about. We are looking in the Smoky Mountains, but we're staying outside of that Pigeon Forge, Gatlinburg kind of area. We're looking a little bit further out where it's less saturated. And then we just like to look in licensed markets within a 4-hour drive, because for us, part of our freedom that we want for our family is that travel freedom. And so what we generally do is we don't block off our properties, but if they are open, we will go stay in them, right? And so we're really trying to kind of build our best life. I love to go back to the houses that we own versus going to other people. So you guys can think about that too. What's a licensed market within 4 hours, or a completely unlicensed market would be the flip side of that. And we're going to talk about things to consider if it's an unlicensed market here just in a second, guys. We'll use some of these tips to just start to, like I said, I think the best way and the free way is to start looking on Airbnb. I believe that there's tons of markets that people aren't talking about that are just close to where they are or close to the people that they love, that aren't these major markets like Smoky Mountains, Rocky Mountains, Orlando, Myrtle, things like that.
Yeah, starting someplace you know is probably your best bet, because you're going to know, your first one, and you're going to know the areas, and you're going to know you've been on vacation there. You know what you're looking for. You know what other people are looking for. So it's just a lot easier to stay when you start out to go where you're familiar with.
Because again, I don't think people place enough importance on the lifestyle aspect of it. Like when we first moved to South Carolina and we didn't have any properties around us, our lifestyle in Colorado was very mobile. We traveled most weekends, right? Because we would just go where it was open, and we loved that. And so that is really, really important to us. And so this is where we purchased. So we closed on our last one today. So Cashiers, North Carolina closes today. That's in the North Carolina Smokies. Chattanooga had a transferable license. Bradenton also had a transferable license and was 10 minutes from the beach in IMG. And then Whitewell, Tennessee was waterfront. I don't even know, Sequatchie. I don't even know how to say that. We've only been to this house for like 7 seconds. Darren's never seen it, but hey, it's working out. It's Whitwell, yeah, not Whitewell. That's kind of just so you guys know where we're at. Because a lot of times I think in these classes, people just talk generalities. We're going to give you a lot of information on what we're doing. And when we buy, guys, our kind of number one priority is a view. So almost everything that we own has a view, unless it's those traditional in-town properties. So these are just a couple pictures of our views, but our one in Helen overlooks a golf course. So I just think you can't duplicate a view. Views are limited. I think it's really, really smart. I would buy a view over other amenities all the time, because you can always add other amenities to that. So
never looking at an Airbnb. I think one of the key things we're always looking for is just something unique, and view is something that is always unique and special to a property that, not everything, even if you're in the mountains, but maybe you don't have it. Having that view is just a key thing for us. So STR laws, zoning, and regulations kind of make or break. We've made a few mistakes along the way. So when we first started, short-term rental regulations were kind of far and few between. Obviously, places have gotten really regulated as it's become more popular over the COVID years. So the first things to do, biggest regulations are going to be at the city level and county level. And typically they've got a website. You can just go and Google, short-term rental regulations and, Chattanooga, Tennessee, or wherever you're looking. And it's usually pretty readily available. Some cities have complete bans on short-term rentals. Some have a moratorium while they're putting rental regulations in place, so they put a pause on it. A lot of them just have caps on the number of licenses that are allowed within a city, and then those regulations may be different on a county level, but on a city level, and as most regulations at city level supersedes that. So, for example, Estes Park, Colorado, where we have a place, the city of Estes Park has a cap on the number of out. So if you buy an unlicensed short-term rental in Estes Park, you have to go on a waiting list, which can be last time we looked 2-3 years out, because anybody that's selling a short-term rental is probably going to sell it to somebody else with a short-term rental and inherit that license. And then once you go outside of that, there's a second set of regulations where you're in the county, but you're still in the Estes Park development area. So Estes Park, you can get a license, but it's still subject to their rules and regulations. Then you get outside of there, and you're just an unincorporated Larimer County, which used to have no regulations. They've just started to put some in, but they're pretty easy and flexible to get. So the biggest thing is just making sure you can get a license or just get a property that you can transfer an existing license. So Google searches, Chat GPT, whatever is usually our best resource. You can find a lot of information. If there are regulations, it's usually readily available. We're in a lot of Airbnb, short-term rental Facebook groups. Just searching through, you go into that group and you use the search bar and type in a city name, and you'll get a lot of conversations about it to, what other people are doing there and regulations. And never rely on a listing agent. But a lot of people in here, realtors, we know how good information is from other realtors that tell you what you can and can't do someplace without doing your own due diligence. Sorry, just saw the pro tip down there. We always email. So even like this property we bought in Chattanooga, Tennessee, has a grandfathered in license. You can't get a license. Is it in the area? I can't remember exactly. Is it the area we can't get a license, or Chattanooga put a cap on the licenses?
Yes, they're not issuing new licenses.
But it's a grandfathered in license, which was transferable with the property. And we bought that off market from another individual, no realtors involved. So rather than just relying on that or a Google search, we emailed the county short-term rental license, said, here's the address, here's a property we're looking to buy, and does this license automatically transfer to us without us having to jump in through any hoops or get a new license? And let them tell us for sure that that was a thing before we proceeded.
Yeah, it's like our steamboat place is they have we're in an area, a yellow zone now. And so they are allowing a certain number in our building, but as they sell, they're not going to renew the licenses. So until enough sell, if we sold ours right now, it would not be a transferable license. So that decreases the value of the property, right? So just really, really dig into it and make sure you get it straight from the person, because just because a property is licensed does not mean you can be licensed. Just because it's grandfathered does not mean you can have the license. And then if the city and county allow it, what else you got to check? I told you guys you have to check the HOA. HOA can have all kinds of different laws. They can ban them. They can make it a 30-day plus, which would put it a midterm rental. So we just sold one of those because we've owned 2 midterm rentals now, the 30-day or plus, and we could break even on them, but we weren't profitable. And again, get the information directly from the HOA. Do not rely on, even if you get delivered HOA docs, you just want to make sure that that is the most up-to-date HOA docs.
And HOAs are probably the easiest to change their regulations at a moment's notice. So HOAs are always a little unpredictable. Try to stay away from single homes, but obviously, we have some condos which are really great, but you're subject to an HOA and they can, decide to change rules at any time. Usually with cities and things like that, even if they change the rules, you're grandfathered in for the most part. And then a business license. Obviously, a short-term rental in most cities, you're paying taxes and other things. Most of them require you to get a business license for those. Specifically a short-term rental business license or a hospitality license. And again, just in your due diligence before you follow through with a purchase, you want to make sure that you can get a business license. They're not capped, they're not restricted. How easy are they to get? What are the costs and fees associated with that?
Darren is getting our Florida one. Florida has about 800 licenses that we need, and
you get a state license before you can get a county license. You got to get a county license before you can get a city license, and then you got to get a tax. I don't know. I'm on step number 8.
So just another thing, especially if you're new and you're really wanting to understand fees, you just need to understand the application timeline and the permit cost. So I'd say the range is 100 to 2,000. Timeline, like it took us for our Grand Lake, it probably took us 3 or 4 months because the city gave it to us right away, but our HOA said they would only look at it quarterly. So we had to wait for that. We need to understand the required documents that you need. Some require a safety inspection, like our Drake Airbnb, we have a full bajillion gallon water tank fire system in the closets that all around the house that was required. And so just know what you need going in, especially from a financial. We have started seeing some where they require neighborhood approvals, like your neighbors have to say, okay, never do that.
Almost like a zoning change.
Yeah, so don't do that, because what neighbors are going to say yes, right? Likely not, unless somehow you have two Airbnb neighbors. But even then, if you have to get somebody's permission, we would highly, highly recommend against that. Hard neighbors make it difficult. When we buy too, guys, we do try to get where we don't have a lot of neighbors. So like our Loveland one, which is in a town, we have an apartment complex on one side and we have one neighbor, and then there's no neighbors in the back of us. There's an alley. So we have one neighbor that we have a potential issue with, versus if you bought in a neighborhood and you've got 3 backyards that touch you and one on each side. And so we highly prefer favorable zoning. If a permit is required, we only buy if a permit is in place. So we do not buy going to get a permit unless we've spoken to somebody and they're like, yes, it's just a fee and sign on the dotted line. We're choosing to move some of our investment money from Colorado because Colorado's regulations just keep tightening up. And it's a very tenant-friendly state versus an owner-operator rights. So just understand that when you're purchasing. And then we do buy in markets where there's no regulations in place. So we've had luck in the past getting grandfathered in when there's no regulations, but of course there's a risk there, guys, as far as if they put regulations in place, they could just kick you out. I had a high school friend, and I'm not exactly sure what her story is, but she finally just lost a fight for her Airbnb. And so here's the last 4 that we bought, and just to kind of show you what we look at. So all of them are furnished, and either they have a transferable license or there's no licensing laws. So you'll see here, either we're not buying something in an area that should be able to obtain a license but does not have one. Just because we've been through this process so many times now, and we know there can be so many hoops to jump through. And the last thing that you want to do is buy something that you cannot rent. I remember, I feel like Caleb, I feel like it was somebody Bryce knew or Nathaniel Duff knew, who somebody had just bought an Airbnb. This would have been a few years ago, and they were not able to use it as an Airbnb, and the financials did not make sense as a rental, so they were going to have to take a loss. And I'm in charge of our furnishing, guys, and yes, we want to always buy furnished, even if it looks like Ranny's house, because it's way more expensive than you guys would think. So this picture is our steamboat condo. We bought this unfurnished, and this is where we learned we don't want to do that. It was just so expensive. So we estimate it's about $10,000 a bedroom. So a 2-bedroom condo, $20,000, a 4-bedroom home, $40,000. And this does not include amenities. This does not include a game room, or if you're adding a pool or any of that kind of stuff. So we like to have it furnished, even if we were just keeping mattresses and some kitchen stuff and a mop and a broom. Like, it really, really does matter. We just did a full revamp on our Chattanooga place. Just last week? And it came furnished, and we got rid of a lot of it, but it was so nice to have what we did have in there to reuse. Like, we reused their side tables, we reused some beds, things like that.
Even just stocking a kitchen from scratch is way more expensive than you think it's going to be if you can just keep silverware and blenders and a toaster and a few things. So and one thing we always look at is there a backup plan, or what's your exit strategy, right? So if it makes great sense as a short-term rental, just the what if scenario in the back of your mind, if some local regulations change, HOA change, things like that. Would it work as a midterm rental? Could you do it as a traveling nurse 30+ day rental? Does it work as a long-term rental? If I need to sell this, am I in a saturated market with lots of inventory? So just always kind of, have that backup exit strategy in the back of your mind when you're shopping.
And then our goal is always to have $10,000 per property in the bank, just for the what ifs, the slow season, upgrades, things like that. And we just wanted to show you guys too, here's the price points of what we just purchased. Now we bought all of these using a 1031 exchange, guys, which we'll do a 1031 exchange class. We didn't have money out of our pocket for any of these deals. It was all equity in other houses, but you'll see, guys, we're kind of shopping all over the place. So really, does the house make sense? And obviously price point matters, but for us, it's more what is the opportunity with the properties. So that's what we just purchased.
The power of real estate and appreciation. Usually when we 1031 exchange, we sell one property and buy two properties. So we sold two properties to buy the.
Yep. And I'll go over just a little quick appreciation math slide later, because we're getting into where like it's starting to get really cool, right? So we owned 8 and now we own 12, right? So we literally 1.5 times, well, and even more from a dollar amount, our portfolio in this one move. But again, it's because we've held on to real estate. One of these houses that we just sold, we lived in, 10 years ago? And so we've had this house for a while. We had it as a long-term rental, and our choice this year was financial freedom, period. So we're selling I loved our Florida condo in Jupiter that was a midterm, like my favorite place ever. And we sold it because it wasn't making us the financial numbers that we wanted. And we are as a family choosing freedom as the number one driver there. And so let's talk about some ways to afford your Airbnb. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on each of these because I think almost everybody on here is a realtor. And so I'm going to just talk quickly, right? We've got the conventional loans, which is the standard route. You guys know, right? This is best. It's going to be likely your lowest down or your lowest interest rate option. 15 to 25% down. You have to have qualify based on your debt to income, your credit score, and generally they want reserves, right? So standard conventional loan product we should all be familiar with. And if you guys have questions on these, pop them down in the comments. I'm happy to go through those. The next one is a second home. So we did this with our Drake home. This is a 10% down loan. You're going to need to talk to your lender to get specifics, but generally you can do it for 10% down. It's generally a lower interest rate, but you need to qualify for both houses. So if you have a $2,000 mortgage on your primary house and this is a $2,000 mortgage, you need to be able to qualify for $4,000 a month in mortgages. You must use it for personal vacations. You cannot hire a property management system. And usually they want it like within 45 minutes or a certain mile of where you live. And it can't be a duplex or a multiplex. But it can be a really great option to enter if finding cash. Like I feel like Darren and I are always chasing cash, right? Like how do we get the cash to buy what we need? And so remember, we're not lenders here, but you're not allowed to rent it full time as an investment property. You have to stay there sometimes. And theoretically, if you don't follow these notes, they could, do a due on sale clause. But this is how we obtained our first Airbnb, and we did use it.
It's minimal. I think the rule is you have to stay there 14 days out of the year. Anybody buying a short-term rental is probably going to use that much or more yourself.
Yeah. So, and you should use them, right? If you're going to do it. House hacking. So if you live in an area, that you can live in part of the house. So exactly what Andrea is doing, right? She has, a separate unit on her personal residence, right? So this is live in one, rent out the others. You can do this long-term, you can do this short-term. Again, if it's short-term, watch the regulations. But oftentimes cities, if they have stricter short-term rental licenses, have a little bit of a different program if it's a primary house for you. So you might be able to primary short-term rental in your area, even if you can't full-time. And so you can buy up to a 4-plex with FHA or 3.5% down financing, live in one, rent out the others, right? And then this is kind of a rinse and repeat. So Darren and I think this was our 19th move together, guys. So we've been together 19 years and we've moved 19 times. And this is because we would live in a flip. So there were short term, sometimes in between a flip. We lived in some dingy basement apartments. We lived in some realtor's house that was on the market that the clients didn't know we were even living in it.
That was just like 3 days.
That was, and pre us being licensed, knowing that maybe that wasn't the best thing to do. But so we have done kind of all the things, but I think house hacking is the absolute best. I think if you have clients interested in investing, you should definitely talk about this with them. And then this is great for people who really need the finances. And you can even see if you qualify for down payment assistance, right? I love house hacking. We have definitely done it. And then again, another hack would be living in it, making it an Airbnb while you live there, moving out, leaving it as an Airbnb and buying your net. So it's just another way to look at house hacking, which I think is super, super smart. DSCR, I think, was that you, Ruben? I think was asking about DSCR financing. So this is a loan. So Darren and I, at this point in our lives, look maximally horrible on paper. So nobody wants to give us loans. We own more than 10 properties. You can get 10 conventional loans, right? And we did, because there's generally better interest rates. But DSCR is great if you're self-employed, because it, you have to qualify. They still do pull your credit. You do have to have some in returns, but it's qualified based on the property. So simple math is, let's say your mortgage is $3,000 a month. DSCR lenders are going to want to confirm that your property makes somewhere generally between 1% and 1.25%. So if it's 3,000, they want to know it's going to make $3,000 a month to, let's say, 3,500. And generally, these lenders will use AirDNA or one of these products. Some will use actuals, meaning if you buy a house with actuals. So this is strictly what Darren and I are using right now. And we are using, what's that group called?
Mortgage Shop.
The Mortgage Shop.
They still have to appraise as a typical residential home, which is usually the tougher part when you're getting lending with the DSCR, because you're buying it at a premium for rents and furnish and things like that. It still has to appraise.
Yeah.
But for the qualification on the mortgage, it's basically just on the income of the home.
Well, and guys, so for our Chattanooga house that we bought, we knew we were under contract at 275. Based on our data, we figured the house was 250. We gave him 275 because he was a FSBO. And his house was overpriced, but he's like, oh, my furniture's worth something, even though we're like, appraisers can't count your furniture.
And the license is worth X.
And the license is worth something, and the appraiser doesn't give value to that. And so he ended up dropping his price to 250, 2.5 is where we landed. And then for those of you, I think most people on this call are homeowners, you can use a HELOC and pull your HELOC for your down payment. So this one house that we just sold that we used to live in, which was part of how we bought these 4, I think we leveraged that one property to buy, when we figure, at least 3 or 4 other properties, and we sold it and still pulled $400,000 of equity out of it. So in my head, but I'm pretty risky, I'm not very risk averse, you're just moving it from one bucket to another. So if you have $100,000 in your primary home bucket, you're moving that $100,000 into an investment. But of course, right, you've got to make sure that the math makes sense, because now you have a home equity line with the payment. So that has to go into your calculations, right? But it can be a good way for you guys to enter and start getting something going. And the Mortgage Shop, guys, does cash out refinances on investment properties. So we have not found this yet. So we just closed with them in the last 3 months, maybe.
November.
We pulled out $400,000 from our Steamboat condo to start flipping. That will put Steamboat as a break-even property, but we believe for that change in income that we'll be able to supplement that with having access to that cash versus paying for hard money. So that's really great if you guys already own investment properties that have quite a bit of equity.
And DSCR loans do come at a premium, because it's easier to get, as far as the qualification goes. But they do come at a premium. So I think it's like two points up front, and then the interest rate's a little bit higher. Like the last one we closed is right at 8%. So 2 points up front and 8%. But qualifications to agrees if the property is making money. And
yeah, it's just been a great loan product for us. I guess people get stressed out about the interest rate. Remember, guys, it's just a part of the equation. That's all that it is, right?
Cash flows are cash flows.
Yep, absolutely. So we're not going to go into, we'll go more into the creative financing options in another class. We just did some of the most creative deals, guys. We have a wrap, we have 2 owner carries, and we have one that we just got added to their note. So at this point, I think Darren and I have done all of these. We have definitely had partnerships. Like, find somebody on this call, guys. If you're wanting to invest and you don't have the capital, see if there's somebody here to do it with. We have done quite a bit in the partnership space. All that we'll say for that is just plan on the exit. At some point, you guys will exit and go separate ways. And so, but we wouldn't be where we are without partnerships and somebody else to have capital. Or find someone with capital and you'll do the management, right? There's so many ways to get creative, and we probably could do a whole class on this, and I'm sure that we will. So I don't want to spend too much time there. Any questions on loans, guys? I know we got a bunch of probably fairly loan savvy people on here. Okay, so you've got your market, you've got your license figured out, you've got your financing figured out. Here's some other stuff to consider.
Yeah. Excuse me. So we did talk about unique and the view all the time, but as Airbnb has really become popular over COVID, there's a lot of things that are really starting to come around and some different options that are really kind of crushing it in the short-term rental space. Tiny homes, like Aaron talked about, the honeymoon suites, the one-bedroom studios, things like that. I mean, we've pretty much stuck with condos and single-family homes, but there's a ton of things out there. Yurts, tree houses, the geodesic domes, houseboats, things like that. But I think people going on vacation are always looking for something unique and different, you know?
And consider themed. So we are starting to do this. So if you look at Orlando Airbnbs, or if you look at these Pigeon Forge Airbnbs, you're just going to see a lot of really cool stuff that most markets aren't doing. So we're going to start trying to do some of this stuff in the markets that aren't. So I showed this picture. A lot of people are getting into these wall murals. We're getting ready to start and try our first set of wall murals. We're starting to get into game rooms. And so Darren just added this weekend, like an old Pac-Man, Pong, whatever.
Galaga, Mortal Kombat, full-size stand-up arcade games.
You know, and he and his buddy got to enjoy that. We're adding Xboxes everywhere.
This full-size stand-up arcade games, $500. I know that was going to bring me $500 back in return, like all day, right?
So think about just making it stand out, making it cool, guys. And then we talked about this, but what amenities does the competition not have? So this is our current backyard in Bradenton. It is a brand new saltwater pool, which we love, but look how boring that backyard is, right? Like, we're going to really decorate it, get it bright and colorful. We're going to kind of do a case study with what we're thinking.
Putting green back there on the grass.
And then I want to just give you guys, and I know we're coming up on 11:30 here, so you guys got to exit, but I want to give you guys some basic, simple math to start with. And then our next class is going to be on the more in-depth math. So you really, if you're going to do short-term rentals, because of the higher amount of time and energy you're spending, you want it to cash flow really, really well. And so your cash flow, for those of you who maybe don't know, is your total revenue less your expenses. Okay, so your top line income less all of your expenses. And so our goal is a minimum of $1,000 a month cash flow. We're really trying to get to that 2 to 3K per month on our properties, and hence why we've moved some of our money. But again, guys, remember, these houses should still appreciate. 4% is a pretty conservative appreciation.
So operating expenses is kind of one of the biggest questions we get getting into short-term rentals, you know. So your operating expenses are all the costs associated with running a short-term rental, supplies, cleaners, utilities, things like that. So any of the expenses, recurring monthly expenses. So if your monthly expenses are too high, it's going to crush any sort of income that you're making. So basically your total revenue, say I'm making $6,000 a month on the property, my cleaning fees, you know, supplies, toilet paper, internet, cable, all those things, insurance, $2,500 a month. So and therefore my cash flow before my mortgage is $3,500.
So you've just got to be careful, guys, that your OPEX is not too high. I will tell you, and I'm going to give you guys a calculator for this at the end of this class, because we had just shopped, guys. We had to have looked at least 1,000 houses, maybe more, and probably talked to 50 or more agents. Nobody has this information, and it's so important. So I'm going to give it to you guys, so you guys have something that you can share with the listing agent. If they say they don't have a P&L, I literally figured out Excel to help make you guys something that's sendable that you can just share. So you can ask for the info.
To figure out anybody that's got, recurring monthly expenses other than your cleaners, right? Because you don't, how many turnovers do I have a month and things like that. Expenses are super easy to figure out. And no reason somebody can't figure it out in 20 minutes,
Or at least get you in the ballpark, right? Because you'll see on a case study we're about to do at our Florida property that our OPEX, their operating expenses, is higher because we got to have pool people over there every week. We've got landscapers, like we just have higher operating expenses. And so you really want to have a good idea of that when you're walking into it. And some of these, even like, people that are trying to be really high level in the game do not have this information. And I'm just like, I literally told this one agent specifically, I said, if you won't help me get this, we won't offer. Like, right? Because what are you hiding? Like, I literally want to know how much it costs to run this house. It is acting as an Airbnb because your gross doesn't matter. It's your net, right? Your gross can just get eaten up by operating expenses. And so I love simple math. And so this is just to get you kind of excited about what this could look like for you. Because we're about at that 10-year point of where we started. We started buying $30,000 properties in Kansas City, right? We were pre-real estate, had no money, couldn't qualify for anything. And now this is where we're at. And so just simple appreciation, right? If you buy a $300,000 house, it appreciates 4% a year. You've got 144 in 10 years. Again, if you do a simple amortization calculator on that 3%, $300,000 house that you put 20% down on, let's say a rate 7.5, you pay down your note $32,000 in 10 years, and then cash flow math. So if you are on the conservative side and you can make $1,000 a month, that cash flow in 10 years, 120. So a 10-year wealth build on a $300,000 house should look like about $300,000. And then what if you had 10, right? That's where it starts to get really exciting, right? When you have this bigger portfolio that's expanding. So again, simple math, but just to kind of get you guys excited or think about actually initiating and taking a step moving forward. And this is how we kind of don't use any of the math that anybody else does. We're going to teach you how to do it all, and we are proficient in all of it, but this is how we do our math. And so we like and ask Ruben, because Ruben actually helped us find a couple of these last deals, but we like what we call a gross income to purchase price ratio. I don't think this exists in the universe.
Part of Aaron math.
It's just Aaron math, but it is a really good, easy way to see if I want to start looking at something more. So basically, if your income's $100,000, I want it to be about 15 to 20%. And this is gross. This is not what I would buy on. This is what I would be interested in looking at. Okay. So if it's $100,000 gross, 15% of that would be a $666,000 purchase price. 20% would be $500,000. So that says, right, if I got $100,000 house, I'm looking between $500,000 and $700,000. What I'll tell you is most all Airbnbs are trying to sell at 10% of this number. So
at best, 0 to 10% probably, if anything you see out.
Yeah, so $100,000 in gross, you would see $1 million property. That math does not look, so hence why we had to look for 800 million houses to make this work. And we'll talk about a couple case studies here, and then we'll have some time for some questions.
So this is the Chattanooga, Tennessee house we just bought a month ago or something like that. Got up there, did a bunch of remodeling, updating to it. So the guy that we bought it from is a FSBO. His gross income last year was $56,500. Like Aaron said, we were originally under contract at $275. Based on appraisal, we got him down to $252, $200. His operating expenses, $1,300 a month. So $16,000 annually, the mortgage payment. So we just look at the mortgage kind of separate from insurance and taxes, right? Because those are expenses.
This is pity.
Is it? Okay.
Uh-huh.
20,000 or 21,000. So our cash, assuming we can do the same that he can, our cash flow would be 20,000 a year. But really, everything we buy with the intent that we can do a little bit better than what the current owner is.
And we found this, guys, on that short-term rental for sale site. Some guy hired a discount broker, one that just puts it on the MLS and does nothing else for you, and it wasn't selling. And he started over 300. And so we caught him when he was in a need, right? And so we contracted at 275, figuring that isn't where we were going to land. But again, even if we did, if we had another extra $100 a month in a mortgage payment, that's not going to make or break. So this house to us was perfect math. It met that 15 to 20% purchase price ratio. You know what I mean? When we started looking at it. So this one, we're like,
slam dunk.
Everybody on this call should buy this house, in my opinion. This was an easy one to buy. We decided to do a decor update because we've really been noticing that decor is really starting to separate Airbnbs. And so you can watch our social. We're going to start posting some of our before and afters of this house.
But I mean, all in, we've spent $5,000 maybe paint. some beds, some, new linens, nothing major.
But then we'll show you this, and we'll do this creative one probably in this math class we're going to teach next. So this is our other traditionally financed house.
It says Chattanooga, Tennessee, but this is actually the Florida house that we just bought.
Oh, shoot. Sorry. My bad. And I don't have the gross income in here. I worked on this till like 10/28. So sorry, guys. I'll just tell you what it is. So the gross income, this one, you would be like, why did you buy it? So the gross income in 2024 was $50,000. We bought it for $570. The OPEX was $17,000, so higher, but this is the pool guy. We got a landscaping guy, so a little bit higher there. Our
bug guy, Florida bugs.
Yeah, bug guy. We got all the guys, right? And then the mortgage is higher, insurance is higher, taxes are higher. So we've got a $4,300 mortgage. So this one, if we did what she did last year, would be negative $18,000. So, but based on our research, what we know in this area is that if you have a killer outside space, so you're attracting the kids for the IMG and the parents with the kids at the IMG, you're making conservatively 100 and up to about 125. So the amenities we're looking to add is we're converting the garage into a game room. We're adding a putting green, but there's already turf in the backyard. We're literally just gonna put holes and cups and pins out there. Bocce ball, we have a spot for it already in the yard. We just need to add the sand. We're hoping to add pickleball. I think literally, guys, I think that might be the difference between 100 and 125 for us.
It's on a corner lot, and just as long as we have enough space to bump out the fence where we think we can, putting in a regulation pickleball court in the backyard.
So that's a maybe. But if then our cash flow should go from negative 18,000 to positive 31. So then we've got, almost that 3,000 a month, which that would be amazing, right? As far as that. So that's where we're at. And Darren already, because he's really good at what he does, she had it set at book $225 a night. If you haven't watched our short-term rental management class, you should, just because it's going to tell you how to make money. And so she was charging $225 a night, I think, during the week, and $250 on the weekends, all times of the year. We just got a booking for $355 a night. So even though we haven't done anything yet, just because we're managing it better, it already should increase. So so that is that one. We'll talk about the other two because they're super creative and different in the next class. But if you want to learn how to do some cool stuff, you should join us. So I'm just going to encourage you guys to take bold steps, right? Moving forward. And so Joshua 1:9, have I not commanded you, be strong and courageous, do not be afraid, do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. So of course, be prayerfully considerate as you answer this. But I also love this from Albert Einstein. A ship is always safe at shore, but that's not what it's built for.